Jesus talks funny in the Gospel of John. I think it's on purpose, but he doesn't sound like that in the other Gospels. So, I just turned myself off. Okay. Oops. Well, Jesus talks a little bit funny in the Gospel of John. He's redundant. He talks in like these grand spiritual truths, and he doesn't talk like that in the other Gospels. So it takes a little extra work to figure out what exactly he's talking about in the Gospel of John. And so that's why there's a lot of mistranslation and miscommunication on what these passages are about. Because John, he writes at about a third grade level in like using the actual alphabet and language of his day, Greek. It's one, like if I went to Greek class when I was in my bachelor's degree, it took a year of Greek. It was awful. I'll just let you know that. It sounded like it'd be great to just like nerd out. No, it was awful. It was hard. But what I learned is that you always start with the Gospel of John because it's so simple in the original language. But the crazy thing about John is he can write at this third grade level, but then have all these different layers of meaning and truth and spiritual like vocabulary that's in there that makes it really rich and nuanced. So sometimes it's hard because it sounds so simple. It's almost written like a children's book on that grade level, but there is some like depth and richness to it that's easily, because of its simplicity of words, it's easily missed on what is actually going on. So we're going to try and avoid that today by starting in a place that I think you're familiar with. Has anyone ever had a problem with their sink? Yeah. Now, I have not always been as handy as I am now because I don't know how to like unclog things. For instance, back when Karen and I were first married, we were living in an apartment and we had melted wax in a pot for some reason. And then somehow, I think it was me actually, I am the somehow. I dumped the entire hot wax, like I spilled it in the sink and it went down the drain. And we were on the second floor. So that sink never worked the same way again. And it wouldn't quite drain really well. Apparently wax, becomes wax in the drains. And we called, what do they call it? The handy person, that's not the maintenance person. And they came out and they had a plunger. And this guy was just plunging our sink to death, like boom, boom, boom. And the sink is like, it's a cheap little metal sink and it's making that sound when you like push it down and then pull it back up and it makes that pop noise. And he's just going to town with this plunger and he's like, well, I think I'm gonna need another tool. They ended up calling a like professional plumber to come out with a snake that had like a spinny thing on it. Technical terms, only here folks, technical terms. The spinny thing was on the end of the wiry snake. It went down and he comes up, he's like, how did all this wax get in the sink? I don't know, man. I don't know. That's crazy. Wow. There's wax in the sink. Yes. So I haven't always been this handy. But at our current house is a farmhouse built in 1897. And the kitchen is an addition that they put on in the 70s. It's kind of like a lean-to. And it is on the opposite side of the house as the actual like septic drain thing. Now the person who installed the drain pipe for our sink made sure it was real level. Now anybody that knows anything about water and how it runs, what happens with water in a level place? Like stays where it's at. What do you want water to do in a drain? Right? You want it to drain. So there is an actual like code system that says for every foot it needs to be this amount of drop. And they didn't do it. It's just nice and level. I'm like, wow, that is a level line. They must have used the bubble level on this thing because it is nice and level all the way down. 25 feet of level. 25 feet of level. So we had a clog in the sink. And no amount of Drano was working on this thing. And the snake that I did have was not long enough to reach whatever was clogging this thing up. And so after about, 4 hours of battling with this drain, we were done. We called the plumber. And the plumber came over. He's a professional plumber. And he goes down in the basement and he says, it's a nice level pipe you got there. I know. Didn't install it. So there is a thing called an access thing, where you unscrew the end of it and you have access to the whole length of pipe. And he took a garden hose and he put a little boot on the end of it. It looked like a rubber hot dog. I swear to you, that's what it looked like. A black rubber hot dog. No joke. And he stuck the hose in all the way until it wouldn't go anymore. So he went like 15 feet in with hose. And then he said, turn on the hose. I'm like, but isn't it gonna like just fall out? And he's like, nope. So I turned on the hose. Apparently, the black hot dog, the rubber hot dog, fills up like this with water. And then there's a jet stream on the other end. So it seals the pipe up and then builds up water pressure. And I'm sitting there, 5 minutes go by and I'm like, what do we do now? He's like, just wait, man, just wait. And then all of a sudden I heard the biggest whooshing noise that I've ever heard in the basement ever before, as that clog finally just like burst through like it was shot out of a cannon. And he's like, okay, turn it off. We turned it off. He closed it up and literally then said, that'll be $220. I was like, where can I buy one of those rubber hot dogs, by the way? He's like, oh, they sell them at the hardware store. They're like $9. Really? Well, thanks for your help today. The next day, I bought me a rubber hot dog. I have not fixed the pipe yet. It is still not very level. But you know what it's like. When you have a clog, things are not flowing, right? It gets stuck and then problems start happening. And all that water starts backing up in the sink and it gets all nasty. And then you get that slow drain. You got all of that like in your kitchen sink, all your food and nasty grease and stuff that's whatever in the pipe, it like floats up to the surface. And then there's the slow drain so that it makes sure to coat the entire sink with all the crud just for you as it goes back down. And you wake up and you're like, oh boy, that is awful. So rubber hot dog, I don't know what they're called. Only technical terms here. If you ever get a clog, rubber hot dogs, they work. They absolutely work. Saved me $200 about 8 times. Yep, I've used that puppy 8 times now. One day I'll fix the level pipe. Not gonna do that right now though. So in this passage, it sounds very transactional. Again, in the Gospel of John, if you do this, then I'll do this. Right? Like, if you obey, then I will do this. Sounds a little bit like, you got your kids or your grandkids. It's like, if you clean your room, I will give you this candy bar. And it's like, oh my gosh. And all of a sudden, like, you create enough, like, I will make this transaction with you because I want that candy bar, right? This sounds very transactional to us. Because we grow up in a society where we get money and then we go to the store and then we buy things with the money and then we come home. And then we go to work to get money and then we go to the store to get the things we need. We have a transactional community. It's called capitalism, by the way. That's how we roll. We earn money, make money, spend money, and that's how we roll. This is not a capitalist society. It's an agricultural society. They're all farmers. They don't know the transactional language like we do. We know a good transaction when we see one. Like, oh yeah, if you do this, then I get this out of the deal. I'm in. Or if it's not good enough, it's not a sweet enough deal, we're like, well, maybe if you add this and this and this, and then you sweeten the deal, right? We know how to do transactional relationships quite well because we grew up in a society that is based on transactions with cash and goods, and that's called capitalism. So that's our vocabulary. So we would just automatically apply it to this. Of course we're going to apply it to this because that's our language. Our language is transactional relationships. But that didn't exist here. And Jesus isn't saying, well, if you do this, then I got this little bonus on the other end for you, a little candy bar, a spiritual candy bar. If you do all the right things, then you get this spiritual candy bar. Now go clean your room. That's not really what's going on in this passage. So let's look at this passage a little bit deeper. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. So it's already done deal. That's the thing right there we got to know on the beginning. Jesus is saying, just like the Father has loved me. Now, in John, there is this relationship Jesus has with the Father that's very, like, I only do what I see the Father doing. I only say what I hear the Father. There's like this real, like, tight-knit relationship Jesus has with God the Father in the Gospel of John. That's a big deal to the narrative. And so he's saying, just like God is loving me, God the Father has loved me, I have loved you. So this is already, like, payday's already happened. There's no transactions that need to happen after this. Like, I have already loved you. Period. Abide in that love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, that your joy may be complete. This is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. Sounds very transactional, right? If it didn't have that beginning phrase on the front end. It's like, well, if you keep my commandments, then you will abide in me. That's not where Jesus is going. He's saying, love is my address, and I've loved you, so now love is your address. That's your home. Your home is love, because God is love, and God has invited you into his home. So Christ loves you just like God loves Jesus. That's the first thing that we notice right on the front end of things. Just as the Father loved me, I have loved you. And then we hear the if statements afterwards. The if statements have some things, but here's the thing about the if statements. The if statements are not causality, they're causality, not contingency. This is the big deal on the if statements. It's not, if you do this, then I will give you this. They're more contingent. If you want to experience this, this is the key that unlocks that door. So it's not necessarily causality, but it's contingent. It's causality. If you want to experience the love of God, you have to live in the love of God. How are you going to do that? You're going to love like God loves. You're not going to experience God's love if you're filled with bitterness, because there's no room for that. If I take a cup of tea that is like really kind of bland, and then I put a half cup of lemon juice in there, Lord have mercy. That's going to be some potent stuff, right? There's not going to be enough room for the other flavors going on in there. And we can sour our experience of the love of God by being bitter people, by being filled with resentment and being filled with like, oh, I can't stand, or if we're always in this posture where we cannot love another person, then then that causes us to not feel love because we're not giving the love. And so when we experience God's love, it's easier to give it out, right? And then we clog up the drain of our life of feeling the flow of God, like the love of God coming into us and then out of us. If we then foster bitterness and resentment and hatred towards people, it's like a big old grease trap in that drain. And then all of a sudden it's like, it is not flowing in us or through us. And it's not because Jesus is saying, oh, no, you don't get it now because you've been bad. It is just what happens. That's what happens. If you want to experience the love of God, you have to know that the if statement here is a causality, not a contingency. So loving is the way to experience God. That's how it is. This is what John is trying to tell us. And he'll write 3 letters later on to make it even clearer to us. 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. And he says, God is love. If you want to experience if you want to experience God, then you have to love your neighbor. That's just how it is. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus even said, love your enemies. And so this love thing is kind of a big deal with the Gospels. It is the deal, like the main point of the Gospels, is to teach us how to experience and then reflect that love of God. So if you want to experience the love of God, you have to do it in community. You have to do it in relationship, because love is something that happens between 2 people. You can have like a self-care and a self-love that can take you to a certain extent, but you're going to have to exercise love with another person that's going to rub you the wrong way. It's going to be a little sandpaper on your life, right? When you can love other people like God loves you, then you know you're experiencing the love of God. You'll experience the love of God when you are loved by another person. I like what Michael whatever, however else you pronounce that last name. He said this, love one another and you will be happy. It is as simple and as difficult as that. Ain't that the truth? Love one another and you will be happy. That is really simple. But boy, is that hard to do. Is that so difficult to actually do? But love others and you will live in love, because you're creating the home that you exist in that's made from the foundations of love. If we don't have love, then you don't live in love. So this is just how it is, as Jesus said. If you want to experience God's love, then love one another. That's the commandment that I have. And then he talks about how I'm showing you what this love looks like. I'm modeling that love for you. When he says, no one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. You're my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. Now, Jesus here is modeling what love looks like in a couple of ways. One, he's ditching the teacher-master hierarchy. He's like just totally tossing that in the ditch. He's like, nope, we're not doing that. You don't have to look at me as like this big authority figure in your life that you then have to have all these extra like pomp and circumstance around me. That was the culture of the day. Like if you get around some kind of a teaching rabbi who had spiritual authority, then like you had to change your act in their presence. And Jesus is saying, we're not going to do that here. That's not how I operate. I operate in love, and love is going to ditch that teacher-master hierarchy. And then he goes further and says that the servant-owner hierarchy, like we're going to chuck that one out the window as well. The servant-owner hierarchy, like there's a lot of people that were slaves and indentured slaves and bonded slaves in this culture. And they had to have certain, like they're the lowest tier of society. They didn't get any lower than that. And Jesus is saying, no, we're not going to do that servant-master hierarchy thing. Like, I'm calling you friends. Now, this is pretty, like, we have an understanding, like, we're friends, right? We're friends, we know each other, we have conversations around each other, we're friends, we're friendly. But the term friends here is interesting. Like, because we have other kinds of friends, too. Like, those of you in the business world, you know, like, you have friends that are going to do you a favor because, yeah, they're a friend and I've done this thing for them, and now they're going to then do me a favor because I've done this thing for them, right? And you're like, well, I got a friend. He's in the plumbing business, and he can bring this hot dog over to your house and just like clear that pipe. And since we're friends, he'll give you a 50% discount, right? Like there's those kinds of friends that are different from, you know, I gotta text my best bud right now because I experienced something really cool. Different kind of friends. Those friends existed in Jesus' day too, where if you had connections and you were well networked, it's like, oh yeah, I've got friends over here, and I got friends over here. Ever have a friend who was a police officer? And then you're like, I had a friend who had a friend who was a police officer, and he got pulled over, and he just hands him the sheriff's business card. The police officer looks at it, he's like, on your way. He's got friends, right? Those types of friends, that's the word Jesus is using here. Like, I'm calling you my friends. Because I need something done in this world. This world is going to need people filled with the Spirit of God that are out and about loving people, and we're going to be friends. I got friends in high places. Isn't that crazy that Jesus would consider, well, I would we would then like reverse that. It's like, no, I got this friend. It's God in heaven. You know, I'm friends with God. We got friends. That's the highest place. So I got friends in high places. But Jesus, he's flipping that. He's like, no, I got friends down there. Don't worry about this. You know, angels and people of heaven. Don't worry about this. I got friends. I got friends down there. We're working on it. We're going to fix this thing. You're friends. I'm calling you friends. You're not servants. You're not, we're not servants and students and all that. Nope, we're friends. Because I need something done down here on earth. And that is to extend the love of God out into the world. And then he says, that's the plan. I'm letting you know. You're my friends in these high places of earth. And I'm letting you know this is what is going down. This is the plan. to take the love of God, the thing that I am experiencing, Christ, saying I am experiencing this love of God from the Father, and I'm loving you that way, and now you're my friends in these places that you're going to go, and now you're going to go and network that love of God with the people that you meet. The book of Acts, by the way, is all about how that works. And Thomas Merton says this: the beginning of love is to let those we love be perfectly themselves, and not to twist them to fit our own image. Otherwise, we just love the reflection of ourselves we find in them. And this is what Christ is setting the people loose to do. Like, not to go and have this agenda with people where you got to try and convert and convince and, manipulate. And it's like, oh man, I'll just make friends with this person, and then all of a sudden they'll be open to my faith, or they'll come to my church, it's like, no, we just encounter people on their own terms as they actually are. Which is why I don't like to tell people I'm a pastor right away, because immediately the spiritual fronts go up. Maybe you experience that when people find out you're a Christian. It's like, oh, got to clean up my language, and don't mention this place I was at last night, and I got to not do this, and I got to not say this, and I got to, all of a sudden, they turn into like a really good actor. And it's like, oh man, I just wanted to talk to you. Just wanted to hang out. So that is, we got to let people be themselves in our presence and be comfortable with that. Even if they live differently and have different values than we do. Because we'll never be able to love somebody if we have an agenda to change them before we love them. Because love is going to make the transformation happen. But if you have the agenda that I will transform them by loving them, it's never going to happen. But you can say, I will just love them and then see what happens. And then that'll happen. The rest is up to them. So Jesus used that authority to ditch the hierarchy. He used his authority as God to say, let's get rid of that hierarchy thing. It's not going to make this happen on earth. And then he says, love is the point, guys. This is what I was talking about from the beginning. He says, you didn't choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I'm giving you these commands so that you may love one another. This is a confusing passage, again. Sounds very transactional, but it's not. But God chose this. I have a misspelling up there. It says good. I meant to say God. I have a fat finger, I guess. But God chose this way. This is the way God has chosen, to love. That is the way. God chose that in advance. This is how we're going to do it. This is the plan. This is what I think can fix what's wrong down there on planet Earth with the human race. It's love. I choose that right now. He says this. And then he says, you didn't choose that. I chose that, and I chose you. There's a double choosing going on here. So God has chosen love as the transforming power of the universe, and then chose you. He's like, you didn't choose me. I chose you. You're the ones to get this done. I believe you can make this happen. Because God is love. Love is the whole point. The essence and nature of God is love. If you can think what love is, then you can input God's name there, and that's what God is like. Because God is love. The essence and nature of God is love. And that love chose you to go do this out in the world. To love the people around you. This is something that God has chosen for you. It is love. Martin Luther King said this: true compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. Love doesn't just love an individual and a person, but then love can actually shape communities. That's what a church is. A community built around the love and presence of God. Church wouldn't be church if it wasn't us in this room together. Because there has to be love present for God to be there and amongst it. And so we can change individuals, we can change family units, we can change communities, we can change cities and then states and then nations and world if we sign on to the plan. And that is to love one another like God is loving us. That's how it works. No amount of changing of economic, political, industrial, commercial, anything, if it's apart from love, it's not going to work. You might prop things up for a while, but it's not going to fix the human problem. The human problem can only be fixed by love. God chose us to love us. God chose to love us and then chose us to love others. As simple as that. So if this is true, if all this is true, if love is the point, God is love, and to experience that conduit of love from God to others, and we're not going to clog this thing up. If that's true, if all it is, then how would this affect what it means to be spiritual? You think about what it means to be spiritual, you got all these like spiritual monk-like practices in your head. It's like, maybe. If it helps you love another person, that would be good. If they make you self-righteous, not so good. What if what it meant to be spiritual was the quality of love that we show to another person? If that's really high, we can consider ourselves a spiritual person. Use that word if you'd like. Because that God is love, and if we're going to experience God, we got to love. And so the most spiritual people are the most compassionate people filled with love. So what if spiritual maturity is found in our level of compassion? Not in how much information we have in our heads, not in how fancy we can say public prayers, not in how much theology we know and how good we can debate it or our church attendance or anything like that. What if spiritual maturity is actually just measured in your level of compassion for your fellow human beings? I think we can do that. That sounds a lot easier, actually, and harder at the same time. And then the last question, what if where your compassion ends is not where you're failing, but where you're growing? What if that's your developing edge? Because we're not going to be able to just love everybody right off the bat. There's going to be people that we are not going to like. People that like just rub us the wrong way. They're sandpaper to our soul, right? What if that edge there is not you failing to love, but you growing? That's your potential growth right there. Developing edge of your life. Where God is inviting you next to love someone else is the person. So figure out in your head, like, where does my love end? Where does my compassion meet its roadblock? And then that's where your next step goes. Because you've already explored all this stuff on the inside of it. What if you knock out some of those roadblocks and road barriers of that person I don't like and that person I can't love? Because there's your developing edge. The people that you have a hard time loving is where you're developing, where you're growing. And what that love looks like is going to be, that requires a lot of wisdom and discernment about how to love people that you don't like. But I trust you. Let's say our Psalm 98 is our benediction, and this is rewritten by Malcolm Guite. It says, "For Christ himself will shine as the true ark, the Holy One between the cherubim, in his right hand, and in his heart the mark and imprint of the wounds we gave to him, which he returns as love. He has declared that love with open hands and heart to him. The world, with all its wounds, its shared desires and fears, will come to seek the peace which he still offers freely. He has spared the guilty, for he has chose to take their place and suffer for them. Therefore we will sing a new song in the all-renewing grace, still flowing from the wounds. The world will ring with music, drama, dance, and poetry, with every gift that grateful hearts can bring." Psalm 98, retold by Malcolm Guite.